the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hello, welcome back to XR Star, your monthly podcast where we talk all things extended reality and the metaverse. I'm your host, futurist Amelia Coleman. The future is uncertain, but one thing that is certain is change. And I believe that we are at the beginning of a technological renaissance, one that is forever going to change the future of industry, society, politics, the environment, and the global economy. One of several of the main drivers of this renaissance is changing demographics and evolving expectations. Gen Alpha is our first virtual native generation. Today, Gen Alpha, along with Gen Z, are students and gamers, but tomorrow they will be our customers, our colleagues, and our competition. Because of the technologies they've grown up with, they think differently than previous generations before. Number one, they are responsive. They've grown up with responsive technologies, things like touchscreens and smart speakers, and this has taught them to be active participants and co-creators. They speak up and understand the influence that they have. For brands, this means that they talk back and they expect to have two-way conversations. Secondly, they don't differentiate between their physical, digital, and virtual lives, relationships, belongings, status, and finances. Of this generation, 75% identify as gamers, and of those, 50% say that they prefer to hang out with their friends in virtual worlds rather than physical worlds. 50% also say that they identify more with their avatars than they do with their physical bodies. What this demonstrates is a demand for the capabilities in our virtual worlds to not only reflect those inside our physical worlds, but also to exceed them, because we don't have the same conditions and constraints inside virtual worlds that we do inside physical worlds. Things like gravity, for instance. So the creative possibilities here are vast. And finally, this one might surprise you. They are willing to pay. While millennials, Gen X, and boomers have been trained to believe that the internet is free, even though we know that we pay for it in other ways, such as data and privacy, these generations have grown up in these subsects of the internet that have their own ecosystems and economies. This means that they have an innate understanding of attaching real-world value to digital and virtual goods, services, and experiences. Take Roblox, for instance. 66 million daily users, 214 monthly users, and 80% of their audience are under the age of 16. And 75% of them say that they want to spend money on fashion for these spaces. And 67% say that they want those to be brand names. So now brands are reaching this market by developing products, services, and experiences directly in virtual gaming worlds like Roblox and Fortnite. Leading this development is Yondr, an immersive technology agency that helps brands build real connections that transcend physical and digital boundaries. Today, I am thrilled to have as my guest Pieter Van Leugenhagen, Yondr's co-founder and managing partner, a keynote speaker, and the author of the book, Welcome to the Metaverse. Hi, Pieter. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So just to begin, can you tell us a little bit about your background as well as what you do at Yondr today?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is Pieter. I live in Antwerp in Belgium, by the way. And my background, I started my career in media. So I worked at MTV for a while, and then I switched to public relations. I worked at a PR firm for, I think, about 6 months or something. And then I started to feel that I had that entrepreneurial spirit in me. So I knew that I had to do something. I start my own business. So I started my first company together with my college best friend, Matthias. It was a digital agency, so we were focused on branding, web, video production, and digital experiences. We were working more regionally, but in 2014, when Oculus, like let's say the mother brand of the new generation of VR headsets, was acquired by Facebook, back then still Facebook, for 2.2 billion, I guess. And that was the moment that we were thinking like, hey, we are already doing video, so the switch to 360 video can't be that hard. That's something that we thought back then. And yeah, digital experiences. Why not explore the power of virtual reality? Because the internet was full of like 360 video. Virtual reality is the next big computing platform. So we start to. So we thought like, hey, let's start a new company. First, I went to CES in 2015. Where Oculus had their own booth at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, every January of every year. It was amazing because that was like where we could test the first Oculus Rift. And then we drove to San Francisco to see like how is the VR, how viable is that VR ecosystem already in the United States, because they're always a couple steps ahead compared to Europe and the US. And then we came back early 2015 and said like, hey, we need to start a new company. We found, or we were looking for a managing partner back then for our first company. We started with Yondr, and that was like the beginning of my career in XR or all things virtual.
Amazing. And so that was 8 years ago now. How has the industry changed, and how would you describe the state of the industry today?
Stable today, but it has been one hell of a ride. So yeah, when we came back from the US, we literally bought our first clients. So we went to a big TV studio in Belgium, or a broadcaster, television company, and we asked them like, hey, can we work for you? Can we just do something, film something in 360, and just give us like €1,000 for expenses? And then we went to a cycling team, which was or still is one of the biggest. Quick Step, famous back then from Mark Cavendish, Tom Bonen, all the big riders. And we asked them like, hey, please, can we film something from your team presentation in VR? And then we went to a big Belgian travel agency, and we asked them like, hey, we are already working for this big Belgian broadcaster and for the cycling team. Can we do New York City for you? Because they still are the biggest travel agency in Belgium for US travel. So we went to New York, and that was our first paid gig that we did. But that was in 2015, May, I guess. That was all over the media in Belgium. It was on television and every newspaper. So that was like a big PR use case for us. And then the phone started ringing. If you heard about the hype cycle, the Gartner hype cycle, that was the moment that we were on our way all the way up to the peak of inflated expectations. You have that technology trigger, that's the first stage. Gartner is an American research bureau, for the people who don't know that, and they have a graphical representation of the market introduction or market penetration of emerging technology. You have the first stage, the technology trigger, something that sparks and sets that sparkle that sets the market on fire. Then you have that peak of inflated expectations, the moment that everybody wants to be in the market, jumps on the opportunity. And then we go all the way down to the trough of disillusionment, because the technology is clearly not ready for mass adoption. And then we take the slope of enlightenment towards the plateau of productivity. And I think, in my opinion now, because after that first travel use case, we worked with brands like Honda, Mercedes, Volvo, with big banks in Belgium and the Netherlands, with Nike, New Balance, Adidas. So all the big brands, they wanted to do something with VR because that was the newest gimmick. But it was not more than a marketing gimmick, because technology wasn't good enough and wasn't ready. There was no content and no reason for users to buy a device, only for the geeks and the industry believers. So we clearly went all the way down to the trough of disillusionment, and that was not an easy time, because all of a sudden the phone wasn't ringing anymore. But now I think since the pandemic, of course, at first we lost all our business. I think a lot of companies lost all their business in March 2020. But then, the whole world needed to shift to virtual. And that was the moment that we started build virtual worlds. Back then, we worked a lot on Altspace from Microsoft. Now, Altspace doesn't exist anymore. Microsoft took it offline. But Altspace was acquired in 2017, I guess, by Microsoft as a social VR platform. And we started build virtual worlds on those platforms. And we did a lot of work in the US. So a lot of companies were purchasing like 50, 100, 150 Oculus Quest 2 headsets. We were building virtual worlds for those companies. And then we hosted an event all online. And then me or other people came to give a keynote speech in that virtual world. And that's something that we did like 20, 30 times during the pandemic. So that was a good business for us. And then, in 2021, October or November, I guess, the moment when Zuckerberg took the stage and said like, hey, from now on, we're not Facebook anymore, but we have a holding company called Meta. And when in the future, we want to be seen as a metaverse company, not as a social media company anymore. That's when everything exploded, of course. So since 2020, the pandemic, after March, I think from June 2020, it went all the way up all the way up. We have a steady growth, and past year, like a very steady growth. So everything is fine now. Although we must say that we had the metaverse hype for the past 2 years. And the term metaverse as such, where we have like the seamless conversion of the physical and the virtual world, where we have those digital layers popping up in the physical worlds, interacting with virtual people in a virtual world. Yeah, we're not there yet, of course, but some of those elements, like virtual worlds, for example, is already like a very viable business. You were mentioning Roblox. Fortnite, other platforms like Spatial, VR Chat, whatever, Minecraft, those are already viable ecosystems where a lot of big brands are already making a lot of money. So the metaverse hype is maybe dead for the media, and that's maybe a good thing that needed to happen one day. Now it's all about generative AI, and at a certain point that will be replaced by something else. But I think now behind the scenes, a lot of work is done. And we are building more worlds than ever before, so it's not that at all. So,
yeah, what a journey! That's great.
Yeah.
So I do want to go back to what you were saying about Roblox and Fortnite, and about these younger audiences that are in these spaces, and it has created this viable ecosystem there. Can you tell us a little bit about what younger audiences want today out of these spaces, and how are brands meeting their desires and expectations?
Yeah, I think that younger audiences, but I think audiences in general don't want ads anymore. And they are not addicted to ads, not at all, but people, and especially also younger audiences, they are addicted to entertaining content. And that's, on the one hand, something that you have on TikTok and Snapchat, the UGC part, the user-generated content, which works very well. But in gaming, you have the same as well. And yeah, gaming is like the engine for virtual worlds and the metaverse in the future. We see a lot happening over there. And the level of engagement that you get from connecting with audiences in virtual worlds is enormous. And we see that especially those younger generations are in those virtual worlds. Of course, it's not only them. If you look at the stats of Roblox, I think it was RDC, Roblox Developer Conference 2 weeks ago, the stats said that the fast growing age group is 16 plus. So they're doing a lot towards that generation. And Fortnite is even older. I think the average age on Fortnite is between 18 and 21. So there are also a lot of older players on Fortnite. But what they do is like they are capturing the audience, the attention of the audience for a long, long time. So that's very interesting. And it's entertaining. It's not advertising. You let the people connect with your audience and engage, but you're not advertising right in their face. Like when I was young, for example, we had those TV commercials, and they are still on right now. And I think for a certain generation, they will do the trick. But for me personally, and I'm a millennial, I'm totally not a Gen Z. I wish I was. Sometimes I feel like a Gen Z trapped in a millennial's body or something. But I'm not watching linear television anymore, so I don't see any commercials. But if you manage to let people engage for 5, 10, 20 minutes with your brand, I think that's golden, something like that. And that's what happens now with the younger generations. They spend a lot of time in those virtual worlds. I think for Roblox, it's like 2.3 hours a day on average for a user, 2.3 hours. a day. So there is a huge opportunity to reach those generations, and they are typically more on those virtual or in those virtual worlds today.
And when you say that it's not traditional brand advertising in these spaces, can you give an example of what it looks like? I mean, is it a branded experience we're talking about, or are there products in the spaces? What is the new twist on advertising inside these spaces?
Yeah, exactly. That you let people connect and engage with your brand. For example, we have one of the best performing brands on Roblox still is Vans, with Vans World. Vans, that we know from the skateboard brand. So they create a skateboard game. From the moment you enter the world, you can take your skateboard and skate through the world. That works. And then, of course, you can buy a pair of sneakers for your avatar. And you were mentioning that's how many percentages was? People are spending real money on virtual fashion. Yeah, that's huge. And especially those fashion brands, they know it, and they also believe that if they want, for example, the Gucci's, Ralph Lauren, Dior, Hermes, they all have all made their appearances in virtual worlds. And then you say like, hey, a kid from 13-year-old can afford a Ralph Lauren or a Hermes bag, for example. But if you want to continue your legacy as a legacy brand, you need to be where your audience is to tell the story about your brand. And when I was young, we were watching like the magazines and the cover pictures on magazines because the big movie stars were featured on cover photos of magazines. But yeah, who's still reading magazines? Apologies for to the print industry, but especially not the younger generation. And also the TV commercials. We're not looking at linear television anymore or watching linear television anymore. So you need to be somewhere else where they are. And if you want to continue the legacy, you need to be where your audience is and tell them the story about Ralph Lauren or Dior or even Vans, Nikeland, for example. And we saw the same. A project that we recently finished was for a big Belgian festival, Pukkelpop. Pukkelpop is maybe not that famous internationally, but they had like headliners this year on the physical festival were the Killers, Florence and the Machine. So they have big names on their main stage. But we did the virtual festival because Pukkelpop, there's the identity of Pukkelpop is focused on 15 to 25-year-olds. They had Billie Eilish as well and Marie. So they are focusing on that target group, but they want to start preparing the 10 to 15-year-olds youngsters to create a connection with the festival because they want to make them ready. Like, hey, I want to be there physically one day. Create some kind of a connection with them. So we built a virtual festival. Like a physical festival, a virtual festival can also have partners or sponsors. Call it what you want to call it, but partners or sponsors. But what we didn't do was like the biggest sponsor or partner was the biggest telco in Belgium, Proximus. And then we had two food brands because they were also physically on the real festival. And we had OnePlus Europe from the mobile phones, the mobile phone brand. And we didn't create like, hey, buy a 5G subscription at Proximus or buy the newest mobile phone from OnePlus. But it was just like brand awareness in the virtual world. So multi-branded approach, which was very interesting in my opinion, because you can split the cost and create a much bigger and better experience. And we seamlessly integrated all those brands in the gameplay of the whole game, of the whole Pukkelpop world. So you had a pavilion of Foodmaker, which is a healthy food brand, and then you need to go to into the restaurant, and the waiter gave you a recipe of vegetables that you need to go and find in the garden, and the points that you made you could also use to buy a backstage pass, for example, because all the games were integrated in the overall gameplay. So that's, in my opinion, general brand awareness and engagement. You get to know those brands, but they are not hard selling you something. So that's very interesting. But the opportunity of hard selling is also interesting if you are a fashion brand, for example, and maybe not only a fashion brand, because I think it's interesting for many other brands as well.
Yeah, fascinating. And you mentioned there's a bit of an age difference between target audiences in Roblox and Fortnite, even though they overlap a bit. So if I was a brand considering getting into this virtual space, what would your advice be about which one to get into? And are there any kind of pros and cons that we need to be aware of?
I think, to quote Simon Sinek, start with the why. That's always a very important one. Yeah, you need to have a clear strategy. That clear strategy could be PR value. I just want to be in my industry the first company in Roblox, for example. That could be something. Then you just have the PR value, but also I want to activate. I have a product launch. I want to do something online. I want to just let my audience know that I have a new product and I want to boost it online. And that's something that you could do. But you need to have a clear strategy why you want to do something. And then, of course, define your target audience. As a brand, normally you know what your target audience is. But if your target audience is like, for example, 35 to 50 years old, then I would suggest not to go for Roblox, even not for Fortnite. Then you need to look for other platforms that are more user friendly, probably work on multiple devices like just the internet without installing an application, because that's too much friction, in my opinion. If you want to do something on Fortnite, don't bet on new users, because if you want to install Fortnite on your computer, it's like a 50 or 60 or 30 gigabit download that you have to do. So that's not something that somebody just is going to do. You have other platforms like Spatial, for example. That's something that we build very often on these days, because you can simply share a link. People click on the link and they can enter the virtual world and do everything else. It's also multi-platform, so you can access it via an Oculus, mobile, and also on the web. So that's interesting. So I think, why? Have a strategy, define your target audience. You need to know why you want to do something in a virtual world. And sometimes it can be first mover and take a lot of free publicity. That could also be something, or build a viable community, establish a community in a virtual world. But then you need to know that it will take some time and a lot of effort to establish that community, and especially maintain that community. But I think, define your clear strategy is something that you need to do first.
That's really good advice. Thank you for that. And for any parents who are listening today who might have concerns over child's safety inside these spaces, wondering if you can share what you know about how the industry is currently addressing those concerns. I know that Yondr is involved in a really cool project.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I believe first, when as long as there are human beings, there will be problems and there will be violence or whatever. But I think those platforms are doing a lot of effort to prevent those things. For example, in the Roblox chat, it's impossible to type fuck shit or whatever to each other, so you cannot. There are very good tools to notify Roblox that somebody is bullying you or whatever. So there are good tools for that, but we are involved now in a funded project together with Plan International, the NGO, and the Flemish government and the University of Antwerp, and we are doing a research or a study about gender violence and sexual harassment in virtual worlds, and more specifically Roblox. So we received a grant from the Flemish government or the Belgian government, and we put together a research group from, I think, 20 youngsters between 12 and 16, because they are clearly the target audience. They are in Roblox. They spend a lot of time on Roblox. And in the first session, we talked about metaverse. And to be honest, I talk a lot about metaverse, but I was very nervous to talk to that age group about the metaverse, because they were literally looking at me like, what are you talking about? That's just normal for us. We are spending so much time in those virtual worlds, and you all of a sudden call it the metaverse. Anyway, it was very funny. And then we talked about what they and how they experience or have experienced violence, sexual harassment, or gender violence in virtual worlds. And then in the second session, we brainstormed about how our end goal was creating a virtual world, or a virtual pavilion, like we call it, that we can add to different virtual worlds through a portal, where we, in a learn by gaming approach, can teach the kids about what is gender, what is gender violence, how can you react to gender violence, and how can you react as a bystander, for example, as well. So we put all that information in mini games together with the kids, which was very funny and very helpful for us as well, because we learned a lot about how they approach those virtual worlds and how they look at it. So now with the first festival, the pavilion went live. So if you went, or if you still go into the world of Pukkelpop on Roblox, all of a sudden you find a portal. So it's like a door. And if you walk with your avatar through the door, you enter the pavilion of Plan International, like a safe space in the virtual world. And that's where we want to educate people, and especially the kids, of course, about the gender and gender violence and sexual harassment, and especially how to react if something happens to you or you see something happening as a bystander.
That's amazing. And I think it's so needed, and not just for kids, but I think also for adults, for any audience, because we are sort of in new territory, especially in these virtual worlds. I know when we were talking about this the other day, you gave the example of, if you recognize a kid from your class who is in that space as another gender, what is there a way to react, good ways, bad ways, etc. And that education, I think, is so important and so cool. So I really commend you for that.
Thank you. I think in terms of violence in the virtual worlds, like I mentioned in the beginning of this topic, I think as long as there are people involved, it's not the technology as such to blame. It's always us, we as people, who are abusing the technology. And as long as there are people, there will, and especially criminals who are very creative most of the time, they will always try to find some ways to work around. Because I get that question a lot, not only about violence towards other avatars, but just criminals in virtual worlds as such. I think that's something that is impossible to avoid. It's impossible to avoid in the real world. So there always will be some kind of attempts for violence in virtual worlds as well. But of course, it's our mission as well as builders to come up with ideas on how to avoid it.
And as someone who works in this space, what do you think the future of Roblox and Fortnite and platforms like this looks like? How is it going to be different in the future than it is today?
Yeah, I think I already mentioned that 2 weeks ago it was the Roblox Developer Conference, and the CEO took the stage, and he made his 10 predictions on Roblox, and some of them I completely are not following. Like in my family, in 5 years, Roblox will be like the main communication of a digital communication channel. I'm not seeing myself using Roblox to communicate with my family members. I think it's strange to do that. On the other hand, that a lot of companies with a Roblox world will start selling more physical items through their Roblox world than virtual items. That's a very interesting one, I guess, because that means that won't use virtual worlds for selling virtual goods only, but also for physical goods. But that takes me to the point that I'm a big believer of the fact that the internet and experiencing content in general will become much more three-dimensional in the future. And that's, in my opinion, also where the whole concept of metaverse is all about. Because some people are talking about the metaverse as the technical layers are 5G and our AI and our IoT and whatever. But those things are already here today. Only for the metaverse, we will need those things on steroids, because it needs to be much better and much faster, because we are talking about three-dimensionalization. And I think content that we will experiencing, for example, that's an example that I often give. Are you familiar with Amazon Messenger, I suppose? And ICQ back in the days? So when I was young, I came home from school, and the first thing I did was starting up my laptop, starting my MSN. I changed my status, I changed my profile picture, and I started chatting with my friends about whatever, share some music, maybe play a silly card game, because that was all that we could do back in the days. And now these kids are basically doing the same with platforms like Roblox. They log on Roblox, they don't change their profile picture or their status, but they change their avatar, and the avatar is showing is an expression of how they're feeling. And then they start walking around in a three-dimensional world and chat with their friends, or even voice call with their friends and hang out together. So basically, and they spend 2.3 hours on an average a day in Roblox, for example. That sounds frightening and scary, but I was spending 2.3 hours on Amazon Messenger as well, I guess, when I was making my homework. So it's just a 3D version of the internet. And I think we see so many use cases where three-dimensionalization makes sense. And I think that's also for Fortnite, which initially started as a battle royale shooter game. But now Epic Games, the mother company behind Fortnite, is also evolving Fortnite towards a game creation system like Roblox is. So brands can start building their own worlds. We are doing some work now on Fortnite for brands because I believe that that's going to be very big because Fortnite is also targeting a slightly older generation. Maybe easier to target them through social media or other influencer campaigns, easier than a 9-year-old kid because they mostly don't have their own phone, own Instagram account or whatever. But anyway, I believe that, and it's not only Roblox and Fortnite. Take a look at Minecraft's success, but also what Meta will be doing with Horizon. They launched it and it flopped somehow, but they are now launching multi accessibility. So also accessibility on smartphone, web, and Oculus headsets. Also, Microsoft is doing a lot of effort with the launch of Microsoft Mesh for Teams, for example. It's a 3D version of Teams. And I believe we are recently entered the beta program to start build corporate environments for companies on Teams, 3D environments on Microsoft Teams. And I see a huge potential for that because today we are working more and more hybrid and remote. And we don't always experience, I think I see, and I think many see the limitations of Microsoft Teams because for a one-on-two call, it works perfectly. But if you go to like 15 or 20 people in a meeting room, in a virtual meeting room, person 13 cannot talk to person 14 because otherwise they're interrupting the whole conversation because everybody is hearing each other through that laptop speaker. So that's a big issue. And in a 3-dimensional space with spatial audio, maybe through a headset in the future, it just works much better. If people who are listening that haven't experienced that, start experimenting with that because it works so much better. And today we still have those clumsy headsets, but it will evolve over time. So I think that not only Roblox and Fortnite, but every big brand, big technology brands, take TikTok for example, that acquired Pico Interactive, big headset manufacturer in China. TikTok with 1 billion daily active users, or 1 billion plus daily active users, are now also building a virtual ecosystem. So this will happen over time if you like it or not. But I'm a firm believer of 3D version of the internet as we know it today, and that we will do this call, for example, in a couple of years, avatar to avatar in a virtual TV studio, where even other avatars could join us and ask questions, raise their physical hands, and the digital avatar will raise its virtual hands, and we can have like a real conversation. I'm a big believer of that. Definitely.
Thank you. You've already given some incredible advice today, but for any brands who are interested in getting involved in Roblox or Fortnite, what's the best advice that you have for them?
I think, like I mentioned, start with your clear strategy. Think about why do you want to do something on these platforms, and then start working with, for example, a studio like us to define the path that you need to walk through, build the world together, the user experience of the world, and think about how you want to market it, if you want to market it, because sometimes it will be an internal communication channel, for example, if you talk about the Microsoft 3D version of Teams. But I think it's very interesting because we see that younger generations, we are not calling them the digital natives anymore. I think my generation, the millennials, were the digital natives. But now we're talking about virtual natives, and they will have so much impacts on work, on social life, on culture, on entertainment. They're used to spend time in those virtual worlds. And I think like the biggest confirmation that we could have for our industry, the XR industry in general, was Apple entering the market. They've never been first movers, but they have always been the game changer. I think that's a big confirmation that the people who are in this industry for almost 10 years now, like us, that we are on the right track. And also that they see a lot of potential for social life, even education. I think there's a huge opportunity for education. A very funny story, but I was scrolling on Spatial the other day, and I bumped into an experience of the Titanic. So I opened the experience, I put on my headset, and all of a sudden I was walking on a 3D model of the Titanic. And the moment I went to the bow of the ship, the song of Celine Dion starts playing, My Heart Will Go On. I felt like Jack, without Rose, of course. on the Titanic. But for history, for time traveling, that's amazing. And yeah, imagine if you put a sauce over it of generative AI, when you could all of a sudden start talking with non-playable characters, say NPCs like we call it, but with a large language model behind it. And they are trained to tell the story about Titanic. You can just walk around there with the sound and you have the feeling that you're actually there. And compared with watching a boring PowerPoint, like when I was young at school, if it already was a PowerPoint, now you can put students back in ancient history and let them experience in an interactive and immersive way how everything happened back in those days. So huge opportunities for that.
Yeah, yeah. And I can see that the overlap between gaming and entertainment and the spatial internet is going to be a huge new opportunity and industry as well. So, speaking of the XR industry, my final question is, what is your biggest fear for the future of this industry, and what is your biggest hope?
I think one of the biggest fears that you already mentioned is like 50% say they identify more with their avatars than they do with their real bodies. That's something that's frightening me. That people are choosing their physical identity over their virtual identity over their physical identity. And I think if we say, to me, those virtual worlds or 3D versions of the internet in general should be like an improvement of our daily lives at some point. For example, we are already meeting virtual all the time, but sometimes we see the limitations. And then I think that a 3D version of Teams and people working on more spatial devices in the future could be like a huge improvement in virtual collaboration. But what I'm afraid of is that a lot of people who are struggling now with loneliness, for example, will jump more and more in virtual worlds and build virtual relationships, and especially when we had that sauce of generative AI poured all over it, and you have those non-playable characters that are in a virtual world where you can have a conversation with, who even remember what you asked them the day before. So you could go in today and they can ask you, hey, how was your work day? How was your appointment at the dentist, for example? When people are start more and more having virtual relations over physical relations in the real world, that's something that's frightening me. And I think that's sometimes a question to myself as an entrepreneur in this space. Like, how can we be careful and how can we try to prevent this? Because I think what we are doing in general is for good, but it can have very negative side effects. And also the Ready Player One scenario, I think a lot of people already saw the Spielberg movie from 2018, when the world is all doom and people are, instead of living in the real world, they have no jobs anymore. They don't have to work. They're living probably on minimum income, and they go into virtual worlds every day because they can be whoever they want to be, and they can actually mean something to the virtual society because they don't mean anything to the real society. I think what we see happening in the real world today with like climate change, and Africa is coming to Europe because it's not livable anymore over there. And we see war all over the world, and people are also, and then, I think at a certain point, there was always a discussion like AR is going to be much bigger than VR, but AR is enhancing your daily life. And if we see the world evolve as it, or if the world continues to evolve like it is evolving right now, then I believe that at a certain point, more people are at a place where they actually don't want to be. And the virtual world can teleport them to another dimension where they actually can meet something or can have like a normal life. And that's my biggest fear. And will it be the metaverse or virtual worlds to blame, or the technology? No, it's a result of what we as human beings are doing wrong in the world. But to end with a positive note, I'm still confident that we as human beings are going to prevent the world of escapism, and that I still believe that the virtual worlds, like the internet, a lot of people are abusing it, but take it away out of our daily lives. It has so much to offer now. And I'm definitely convinced that virtual worlds and the metaverse as such will give us experiences that were before we're not able to experience in our life, that we will meet new people, that we will travel places virtually. But on the other hand, I'm still a human being, and I need physical interactions with people. So I hope we find the sweet spot between in real life and the digital or the virtual life in the future.
Yes, I do as well. And speaking of those connections, if somebody wants to get in touch or to follow you or get involved, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can send me an email, Pieter. It's Pieter. It's like Peter in English, but then with the I before the E. That's how we pronounce it in Dutch. At yondr.agency, or just add me on LinkedIn. It's Pieter Van Leugenhagen. You probably see my name in the credentials. So just add me on LinkedIn and let's have a conversation.
And thank you all so much for watching and listening wherever you may be. And I hope to see you soon. Take care.